Hello Wannabe Mechanics. In this episode we'll replace the front wheel bearing on a Volkswagen Passat CC. Although bearings reduce friction a great deal, automotive wheel bearings still take a lot of abuse. Not only do they have to support the weight of your vehicle while traveling over potholes, different types of roads and the occasional curb, they must also withstand the lateral forces of corners you take and must do all of this while allowing your wheels to spin with minimal friction at thousands of revolutions per minute. They must also be self-sufficient and sealed tightly to prevent dust and water contamination. Modern wheel bearings are durable enough to accomplish all of this. Once a wheel bearing seal starts to leak, the bearing has begun the process of failure. A damaged grease seal will allow grease to leak out of the bearings, and dirt and water can then enter the bearing cavity. Water is the worst thing for bearings as it causes rust and contaminates the grease. Faulty wheel bearings may also impact your vehicle's anti-lock brake system, ABS. Excessive play, wear or looseness in the hub will often cause the sensor ring to wobble as it rotates. Wheel speed sensors are very sensitive to changes in the air gap between the tip of the sensor and the sensor ring. Consequently, a worn wheel bearing may cause an erratic signal which will set the wheel speed sensor trouble code and result in the ABS warning light coming on. Don't go anywhere guys, meet you back in the shop right after our usual intro. Alright guys, let's get started. The tools we will be needing for these operations are a 24mm by hex socket for the removal of the drive shaft hub nut and the long strong brake bar. An 18mm box end wrench to remove the sway bar stabilizer link. Two extenders. A 17mm socket with a brake bar to remove the lug nuts, a flat end screwdriver for various operations, a 10mm wrench for the mount holding the wiring, a high torque ratchet wrench, a 21mm socket to remove the caliper bracket, an 18mm socket for the tie rod and the sway bars link, a 16mm socket for the lower control arm joint bolts, a T30 Torx for the rotor's bolt, an M6 to counter hold while removing the 18mm nut from the sway bar link, an M14 to remove the 4 bolts on the wheel bearing hub assembly, a 7mm Allen bit for the caliper bolts, which I initially forgot to film, and of course the new wheel bearing hub assembly, which comes with its new 4 bolts and the new hub bolt. Jack up your car and use a jack stand as a safety measure. After you remove the wheel, you can slide it under the car as well. Please watch our video about safely suspending your car before any operations. Remove the 5 17mm lug nuts to remove the wheel. Place a bit spline under the caliper and ask someone to keep the brake pedal pressed to hold the rotor in place while loosening the drive shaft's hub bolt. Loosen up the hub bolt using a brake bar with the 24 by hex socket. Improvise an extender for more strength. Remove the hub bolt. Use the 10mm wrench to remove the wiring mount. Use a flat-end screwdriver to remove the connector from the adjusting valve housing if you have DCC adaptive chassis control. If not, just remove the ABS connector. Remove the splash shield's balls and then the splash shield. Remove the three 16mm bolts on the lower control arm joint. Remove the tie rod using an 18mm socket and a hammer. Use the 18mm box end wrench and the M6 to remove the sway bar link. Use the 7mm Allen bit to remove the two caliper bolts. Pull the brake caliper firmly to compress the piston just enough for the caliper to slide off. Disconnect the drive shaft and the control arm. Remove the clip holding the windshield washing hose. Remove the three clips holding the weather strip. Take out the weather strip. Remove the nuts holding the windshield wiper arms using a 13mm socket. If they are stuck, and they usually are, use a windshield wiper arm extractor. They are very cheap and easy to find. Gently remove the plastic covers, pulling upwards. Now you have access to the hex nut and the 3 hex bolts. Remove the 3 hex bolts and the strut is out. It is quite heavy, so you might want to ask someone for help. If not, just hold it using the other arm. If the bearing is very damaged, you might hear weird noises when spinning the rotor. Remove the 2 21mm bolts holding the caliper bracket and take it off. Now you can easily remove the rotor. Apply plenty of WD-40 to help remove the 4 bolts holding the bearing hub assembly. Remove the bolts holding the bearing hub assembly using a brake bar and the M14 bit. Place the strut assembly on a workbench and remove the bearing hub assembly using a hammer and any metal cylinder with the right diameter. There was a lot of rust holding it in place, but this time violence solved the problem. This is the wheel speed sensor. It is very important to remove the crusted rust deposits without damaging the wheel speed sensor. Insert the new bearing hub assembly and make sure there are no gaps around it. Thread the new bolts and torque them up to 70 Nm or 60 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. Clean the bearing's hub assembly surface and the inner side of the rotor for a perfect fit. Put the rotor in place and tighten the T30 bolt. Attach the caliper bracket back on. Thread the bolts holding the caliper bracket and torque them up to 200 Nm or 150 foot-pounds. Now we can place the strut assembly back. Check the arrows drawn on the upper mount and make sure they face the driving directions. Fast forward all the initial operations in reverse. Insert and torque the 3 hex bolts up to 50 Nm or 11 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. Apply some grease to keep the rust away. Grease the end of the drive shaft and reconnect it to the steering knuckle. Connect the control arm and the steering knuckle and thread the 3 bolts back in. Thread the drive shaft's hub bolt and just hand tighten it for now. Torque the 3 16mm bolts up to 100 Nm or 74 foot-pounds. Torque the 18mm bolt on the sway bar link up to 65 Nm or 48 foot-pounds and counterhold with the M6. Reinsert the brake caliper. Torque the 18mm lock nut, connecting the tie rod to the control arm up to 75 Nm or 55 foot-pounds. Torque the caliper bolts using a 7mm Allen bit up to 35 Nm or 26 foot-pounds. Use the 10mm wrench to tighten the bolt on the wiring mount. Reinsert the 2 connectors. Press the retaining spring back in and use a small hammer if you need it. Clean the rotor with some brake cleaner. Reinsert the lug nuts and torque them up to 140 Nm or 103 foot-pounds. Thread the hub's bolt and apply the recommended torque depending on the type of bolt you have on your car, and you are done. Great job, Wannabe Mechanics! Thank you very much for watching. Use the comments section for any questions or suggestions, and if you find our videos interesting, make sure you subscribe for the latest wannabe mechanic videos. Bye bye.